No, that's totally right. And, like, straight to the facts, I mean, it's decentralized and it's immutable, and that matters. So, what is a decentralized immutable ledger? Well, so, oh, the battery's out. Thanks. Sorry, the battery died. So what is a decentralized immutable ledger? Essentially, it's an open, transparent database that lives on many different computers all over the world. And the real innovation of blockchain is the fact that all of those computers can stay in sync with each other, and they can all agree on some sequence of events. And that's really powerful because traditionally we need some form of clearinghouse to help us keep a source of truth in all sorts of industries, whether it's voting, brokerages and exchanges, money and the allocation of money, and many other trust-based industries. So to me, the blockchain and blockchain technology represents a sort of equal opportunity internet space. And we've never seen that before Bitcoin. So it's really, the sky's the limit with it, and we're just getting started. With blockchains, people can be empowered to be first-class citizens in the economy. And I think that's really powerful because, there's so many layers of complexity to a lot of things that we interact with and just take for granted, like the monetary system, voting, even brokerages. There's like 5 different layers of brokerages, and when you buy stocks on a brokerage, you don't actually own those stocks directly. The brokerage owns them. So there's all kinds of weird, misdirection with blockchain, and specifically unpermissioned blockchains and governed blockchains. We can create an equal opportunity space that levels the playing field in the economy, basically. And that's a really powerful notion. Essentially, what we're creating with blockchains is an internet of value, where we can express value directly to each other. We're the authorizers. We don't have to ask for permission to send transactions anymore, which is how banks work. Anytime you want to send some money to your friend, you ask the bank, please send my money to my friend, and then they can even decide, nah, we're gonna like double check that or something, and there's all kinds of situations like that where people aren't in control when they should be, I think. So that's really what we're able to accomplish with this technology. And on top of that, I mean, there's new business models we can unlock where people are actually part owners in the services they're using online. And I like to call that the equitable internet that we're creating. So rather than an Uber driver being a contractor for a company making billions of dollars, what if they were a part owner instead? And they got, an increase in value as the service increased in adoption. And likewise with Facebook, what if every time you liked something, you actually got a little kickback? You got paid for that. You should, because what you're doing when you're liking something is curating, and that is valuable. But Facebook doesn't want you to know that, because they make billions of dollars by farming all of us as products. So what we can do with blockchain technology is totally flip the script and create new types of business models that put people first and empower them, and that's really powerful. I think that what we're about to see is a whole new gig economy, unlike anything we've ever seen. Uber, Facebook, Airbnb, or these apps you can download and make money off, that's just the start. pretty soon we're going to remove the company from the equation and let people just deal with each other directly and earn value and reciprocate value. And I think it's really going to help a lot of frustration in the world today because, you know, rather than consolidating wealth around companies and, you know, especially the tech giants are the best example, I think, of consolidation of wealth. What we can do instead is distribute it out to everyone who's participating proportional to what they're putting in. So we can create meritocracies with this technology, and to me that's really powerful.
Thank you. Hey, can you tell us what are the many uses or how it's being used right now so we can have a better understanding of how blockchain technology functions?
Sure. So Rob did a real good job explaining what blockchain is, especially on the financial aspects. But there's a lot more applications beyond just the finance, beyond just Bitcoin. One of the things I work with people on a lot is about controlling your identities, especially in the light of things like the Facebook, Analytica, all your information's going out, the banks losing information on you, people getting hacked, and all your social security numbers going out. With blockchain, you have the ability to put your information in a secured source, have it verified, and so when you go to Facebook, you don't need to put in an email address, your name. They don't need to know this information. They can just scan quickly a little QR code that's already verified your information, and they know they can trust it. Well, they don't have to trust it. They know it's true. And you're in. Imagine a world where when you go to open a new bank account, while banks are around, you don't have to go in with a social security number and 2 pieces of mail and your grandparents' ancestral trees. You can go in with your phone, show them a QR code, they can scan it, they know it's you because it speaks true, and you're in. You have your account. Those are some of the best use cases in my opinion because our identities are sort of everything, right? But then there's other use cases on it beyond just that, like Rob was talking about advertising. We're all products. Some of us don't care, some of us, it's the last thing we want to be, but we don't have any say in it. If you want to live in a modern world, it just sort of is what it is. So like a real world use case, everyone's familiar with like Chrome and Firefox and Edge, if anybody uses that. There's another browser now called Brave, made by the same guy who helped design Mozilla Firefox, where they strip all the advertising out of websites. And what they do instead is they form direct relationships with advertisers. They'll insert the ads in, and you as a user, when you launch the browser, you go into your settings and you can say, I want to be advertised to or I don't. And if you do, you get a part of that kickback. You know, every time you see an ad, you'll get a little bit of a token that you can trade for value or trade for something else. The internet is changing. There's a couple of different solutions for just how you use the internet. We all know we've essentially lost net neutrality last week. So Comcast, because they have a stake in Hulu, they could decide, you know what, we're not going to tell you you're going to charge more for Netflix. It's not going to be as fast as if you use Hulu because we own Hulu, right? So how do we avoid that? Well, we use anything from a mesh network to, there's a company in Ohio called Substratum. They're decentralizing the web, getting rid of firewalls, getting rid of the oligopolies that we now have in place, right? You fire this up, and not only can you browse the full internet without worrying about restriction, without worrying about who's watching, you can get paid to do it. Because by just boosting your computer on and saying, you know what, I want to host a node, then every time Ingrid goes to make a web request, if you serve a little bit of that web page, you get paid. And so I agree the gig economy is going to have a whole new revolution of things to do and ways where we can make money. That's everything.
Awesome. So I'm just going to recap real quick. So blockchain technology is a ledger that records different transactions, and they form these blocks. and then they connect. And when we want to look at a transaction, you have to like kind of go through the block and to the one that you want to see. Awesome. And so then it X out third parties, meaning banks, all these companies in between. So it's peer-to-peer or peer directly to whatever entity. So we don't have to ask for permission. And so then there will be ways we'll be incentivized to use some of these applications because we can get paid because they'll be on a blockchain. Awesome. So did you know that there are different kinds of blockchains? Everyone really, they always say Bitcoin. Of course, Bitcoin's the most popular. Thank you, Bitcoin, for popularizing the whole situation. But did you know there's many, many different types of blockchains, and they have their own way of acting or characteristics that are formed by, I guess, the people who create the blockchain or the community that kind of upholds it. And so I would love to hear more about the different types of blockchains, and especially about EOS.
Sure, great question. So, yeah, there's essentially 3 different major classifications of blockchains. Unpermissioned is the one that I think most people are familiar with. That'd be Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Monero, and so on and so forth. Any blockchain that anyone can access, it's open access. There are basically a set amount of rules in the code of the blockchain itself, and those rules are the law. So if something unintended happens within those rules, it's fair game. We just keep going on. And so this has good and bad side effects, I think. The good of it is, really no one can get in between you and what you want to accomplish on a network like Bitcoin. So if you want to send something anywhere to any Bitcoin address, you can. No one can say, there's no means for saying that's illegal or you can't do that or censoring your transaction. You can just send it. But when we get into more complex blockchains like Ethereum, which, show of hands, who here is familiar with Ethereum? Okay, so about half the room. I'll give a quick rundown real quick, just for anyone who's unfamiliar with it. Ethereum is a platform that launched in 2015, and it was the first, what's known as a smart contract platform. So what you can do with Ethereum is run any arbitrary program, basically, in Ethereum's programming language called Solidity. This is really interesting because now you can do more than just value transfer. Bitcoin, basically, mostly all you can do with it is value transfer. I want to convey value to someone in Japan, blast it over there in 10 minutes and we're good. But there's more complex use cases, kind of what we alluded to earlier, that I don't think Bitcoin is very well suited for. And Ethereum was the first to market to allow people to work on that kind of thing and make what are known as decentralized applications, or DApps or dApps. And so these decentralized applications allow you to put all kinds of logic into the blockchain and run it, and it runs across all of the full nodes, which are all of the computers that have the whole blockchain on it. And to give you a little idea, that's mostly impractical for the majority of people. We actually set up an Ethereum full node recently, and it took 5 days to sync it, of the computer just being on for 5 days straight. And it was, a huge amount of data. I can't remember how big it is. It might have been 180 gigabytes of data. So there's no way we're all going to keep one of these in our back pocket right now or for this foreseeable future. But anyways, Bitcoin and Ethereum are unpermissioned, and this is especially interesting in Ethereum because when things go wrong and not according to plan, there's no way to undo it. It's one of the properties. So when a software bug causes $300 million of Ethereum to be lost, it's just lost. There's nothing that can be done. And this has some consequences. For one, it's a bad user experience. If it's very sharp. It's got a lot of sharp edges, and if you accidentally make a mistake, you can totally lose access to your funds. So this is part of the reason why blockchains haven't been adopted en masse yet, because there's a lot of challenges to overcome to make it easy for everyday people to use. And I think that's the major thing that's preventing this stuff from going mainstream and everyone everywhere using it yet. Those are unpermissioned, and what we also have are permissioned blockchains. And I think those are much less interesting because you're basically taking most of the innovation away and just creating a database. So examples of unpermissioned or permissioned blockchains, Hyperledger is one that IBM works on. I consider Ripple to be permissioned, even though it's technically not a blockchain, but it's permissioned because all of the people who are the full nodes are chosen. So it's not open access. It's kind of like a walled garden. And I don't really study permission blockchains much because I think they take away most of the innovation, which is that open access. But there's actually a third type of blockchain that has recently come to market about a week ago, actually. And that's the governed blockchain, and that's what EOS is. So on EOS, we've actually got some of the properties of the unpermissioned blockchains, some of the properties of the permissioned blockchains, and some new properties too. And I'll go into that a little bit. So EOS is open access, but everyone who comes into EOS and uses it signs a constitution. So every time you use EOS, you're actually digitally signing a constitution. And this constitution is ratified by the EOS token holders. So essentially what we have with EOS is a self-governing community that can vote on referenda, they can change the constitution, they can pass proposals. So in EOS there's 5% fixed inflation rate, and the token holders can say, we want to take some of that inflation and direct it to this proposal to fund, like, a foundation, or this other one to fund an arbitration forum, because EOS actually has the checks and balances that we're familiar with. There's a legislative, which is the token holders themselves. Everyone with EOS tokens gets to vote with those tokens. There's a judicial, which is served by these arbitration forums. So in EOS, you can actually file disputes and attempt to, seek justice if you feel you were wrong or you feel someone broke the Constitution. And this is really interesting because now we've got a judicial system that exists on the internet, totally separate from nation states. It's never been done before, and it just launched a week ago. So it's going to be a really interesting experiment to be a part of and watch. And then lastly, the third branch is the executive, and that's what block producers are. So the block producers are voted on by the EOS token holders. There's 21 active block producers at any given time, and any number of standby producers. And the active block producers are essentially doing all the validation. So in EOS, the theory is that there is a certain amount of validators that is the optimal point between decentralization and performance. And that number is 21. according to Daniel Larimer, the guy who invented EOS and delegated proof of stake, which is a consensus algorithm that EOS uses. So it's really interesting. A lot of people are under the assumption that, oh, there's only 21, that must be centralized, right? But actually, it's more effectively decentralized than Bitcoin or Ethereum, because Bitcoin or Ethereum and Ethereum have mining pools where the miners have actually turned into cartels, pooled all their ability to validate together, and those pools are controlled by single entities. So in Ethereum, I think there's 11 relevant cartels, and in Bitcoin, there's something like 7. So, 21 is actually a larger number than those. So it's kind of paradoxical in a sense, but at the end of the day, in a system like EOS, the token holders have the last say. So if a block producer, say EOS Detroit gets elected, if we start messing up at our job, or we're trying to collude in order to benefit ourselves, and that's detected, we'll just get fired instantly, because the election never ends. Every half a second, someone can change their vote, because EOS has a new block every half a second. It's also the most performant blockchain in that the throughput is the highest. And this is really interesting, because now we can do things like Facebook, real-time applications like decentralized exchanges that feel like normal applications that we use every day, but actually are based on blockchains instead of like Facebook servers or Google servers. So anyways, that's kind of a rundown of the 3 major types. Do you have a question? Okay, the question was, do you see any issues arising with EOS?
Like there was the other Bitcoin and like where you like the money was gone, it's all gone. Like when the money left Bitcoin, it disappeared.
So are you talking, just to clarify, so the question is, do you see any issues with EOS like losing access to your funds?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, because just like the other blockchains, if you lose your keys, you're kind of SOL. So your keys are the thing that allows you to make authorizations, and every wallet, if you've heard of a CryptoCurrency wallet, all that is an encrypted container of keys. And you've got a public key, which is your address. That's where people send to you. And then you've got a private key, which is the thing you use in order to make the transaction happen. So you never want to give that out, because then someone can basically steal your identity. But yeah, there's still huge problems with key management that we need to solve. One interesting thing with EOS is the core development companies actually working on putting the keys into people's iPhones. So there's a thing on iPhone called the Secure Enclave, and they're trying to figure out how we can store the keys in that. So it'll make it a lot easier nowadays. And if your keys are just kind of abstracted away, secure in there, and you can just use it, it's much less likely that you'll lose your keys. Maybe if you lose your phone, but there's other ways that can be mitigated using things like iCloud keychain. So there's really, at the end of the day, the major hurdle to adoption is figuring out how we can make these applications just as easy to use as a normal website like Gmail or Facebook. And password reset is really hard to do in a blockchain. It's not impossible. In fact, EOS supports hacked and lost account recovery. It's one of the first blockchains to do that, but it's still not. Yep, another question?
We can hold off for just 1 second on questions until the very end, if you don't mind. Because it's starting to get a little technical, and I don't know if everybody is following, so I just kind of want to kind of go back over what you said. So we have unpermissioned blockchains, which are Bitcoin, and then we have permissioned, which are ones developed by corporations like IBM, which are uninteresting. And then we have the governed, which is EOS, which is a new blockchain that just came on the market about a week ago. And it requires that every token holder sign a constitution that they've created and that they are able to ratify. So this is why it's a really important moment. I'm trying to get all my friends to hold some EOS because this is a great time to ratify the Constitution. The first line of the Constitution is about nonviolence, actually.
Yeah, so the first article in the provisional Constitution, so we had to launch EOS before we could actually ratify a constitution, because there was no way for the token holders to vote. So that meant we had to launch EOS with a provisional constitution, just a temporary one until we could ratify the real constitution. And Article 1 of that states, no member shall commit violence against any other member. There is a second sentence to that I think should be struck, and EOS Detroit will be advocating against that second sentence, which is unless, it's something like, let me just paraphrase it, I don't know the exact wording, but unless through lawful means to protect life, liberty, and property. So, i.e., unless an existing judicial system does something to protect life, liberty, and property. And it becomes a really nuanced and difficult conversation because that second that second sentence, off-chain justice, i.e. the traditional judicial system that we're all sort of under today, it does have some uses, but it's also quite violent. And
this is a really great example about how when you're involved, you can advocate for, you can be critical of, and that is being part of the EOS community. So this is an experiment. It is very new. There's nothing like it. But I think one thing that I really love about this, Dan Larimer, who he mentioned, who created the blockchain technology, he talks about how he is into nonviolent government, nonviolent economies. And I think for those of us who are within a social justice practice, this is really important. For those of us who have certain values associated with what we do, this is important because right now, cryptocurrency has a bad rap, right? Because of Bitcoin, things can go into the black market and things of that sort. So EOS Detroit is trying to solve for some of those kinds of issues. And so in a good example, some of the decentralized applications that are being made on the EOS blockchain look like in Nairobi, they're creating an application that incentivizes children to go to school. So they will be able to earn tokens to go to school. This is very important if you're living in poverty, and it's very difficult for you to take time off to do whatever you need to do for your family to go to school. There's another application that will incentivize children to learn coding. And so they will earn tokens while they're learning coding. So in terms of some real world applications, this is what that looks like, and this is what's in development right now. So this is definitely a blockchain to follow. Thank you so much, Rob. Yes, I would love, you go ahead, and then also tell us how we can get started, how do we participate?
All right. So one thing I would add to all of that, which includes all blockchains, is an important thing for most people is I categorize blockchain into three basic categories. There's the financial side, which can go anything from market speculation, which is what most people who are familiar with it, that's what they're familiar with, the price. Buy some and get rich. There's the technical aspect, which Rob was just talking about, which is the actual just sort of referring to, which covers everything from, the original point of this was to, the original quote was to bank the unbanked, give financial capabilities to the 2/3 or more of the planet that don't have access to a bank, can't get loans, can't get funding, It wasn't really meant for, not that it wasn't meant for, but it wasn't, the idea wasn't specifically for, let's say, the standard American who, we have access to credit cards, we have a financial dollar, even as unstable as ultimately it may be. It's the most financial, it's the most stable one on the planet. This is for people in Nairobi or in South America, anywhere in Africa, in developing nations in the Middle East, struggling nations throughout Europe, in Asia. They can have access to a system that they've never had access to before. And so when you're looking at what you want to do with anything within crypto, it's sort of, you can do all three, but it's sort of, to me, important to realize there are different avenues that intertwine, but they are totally separate. The price of Bitcoin today has no real effect on the real use case of Bitcoin. It was useful when it was a fraction of a penny. Just as useful it'll be if it's $100,000 for one coin. So that's the key point. And segueing into how you want to get into it, it all sort of depends on what your motivation is. Why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you interested in blockchain? If it's for money, let's do a quick survey. As far as blockchain is concerned, who's more interested in the financial aspects? How can I make money? Okay, a few people.
We see you.
Who's interested in the technology, whether it's being a developer or how you can use it? All right, and then there's the social aspect. People are interested in the social aspects of it. How about all of it? All right. So there's a lot of ways to get involved, and a lot of them don't involve you having to put up money at all. Again, that's the one you see on CNBC and things. So one of the easiest ways, essentially, is going through the financial method. That's how I first got started, to use it as a currency. And now it's even easier, being 2018. You go to an exchange, which is something like Coinbase or Gemini. You tie it to a bank account, and you buy as much as you want to. Usually you buy one of the bigger two, which is Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then you use those, and you can purchase any of the other altcoins out there. If your sole goal is making money from it, there's a few ways to do it. You can buy it and hold it like you would gold or a traditional stock, which means you're not looking at it every day because you'll give yourself high blood pressure and gray hair. Because it's a very volatile, it's a new market. As they were talking about how new it is, people compare it to the internet. All the battles you hear, whether it be between Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, EOS, any of those, what they're really arguing about in comparison is what's the best platform to run email, right? That's where we are. This is very early in it. We haven't talked about social networks or any other use of apps, anything we use the internet for now. So you can buy it and hold it and just wait, and eventually, if you believe in the project, the price will go up. You can act as a trader. Those are sort of the rock stars of the crypto world. It's highly ill-advised to sort of go that route. You have to be really into it and really a mixture of luck and skill to make money. Most people will lose money on the trading aspects of it. You can mine it, any of the cryptocurrencies, if you have, I would say, mediocre technical skills. Some coins, it doesn't take too much. If you can follow sort of a work protocol, you can set your computer up to run one of the nodes like Rob was talking about, and you'll start generating coins. Or you could buy into like master nodes. There's a lot of different avenues, but there's financial ways you can buy into it. Or you can get into it on some of the other aspects, like I was talking about earlier with like Brave browser, which just, I think, 2 days ago or so, maybe it was even yesterday, like I said, they ripped the ads out of your web browser and replace it so you can make money. So all you gotta do is fire up the Brave browser and say you wanna view ads. And just for viewing ads, you're gonna earn Brave tokens. There it is, you've made cryptocurrency without having to do anything. Substratum is another one. Althea Mesh is a mesh network. They're working on that, where basically you help get rid of Comcast or AT&T, and you start our own mesh network of internet, and you get paid for being a part of that network.
So I just want to explain for those of you who might not know what a mesh network is.
Oh,
It's,
yeah.
it's basically, imagine a neighborhood and certain houses have these different satellites and the signal bounces to them. And everyone in the area can get free Wi-Fi. It's a very simple version of explanation. And there is the Equitable Internet Initiative that is in effect right now where they're working on 4 different neighborhoods in Detroit to create three different neighborhoods, and then there's a 4th one that was already created. So we'll have about 4 mesh networks in operation in Detroit very soon. We're going to take some questions. Please raise your hands. We are live streaming, so I really want to give you the mic.
Hi, my name is Eric, founder of Quantum Blockchain. Why don't you touch on decentralized lending?
The decentralized what?
Lending.
Decentralized lending.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, there's a few decentralized lending platforms. I don't think any have really achieved widespread adoption. One of the major challenges with decentralized lending, which is allowing any 2 people to, one person to be a borrower and the other to be a lender, to go into that arrangement is, I think that in order to do this right, we need good reputation systems, which don't exist yet, as far as I know, in the blockchain space. So the reason we need that is because what's to stop me, the borrower, from just running off and never paying back my loan? There's some different approaches there. One I know of is having to put up bonds. So if I want to be a lender, maybe I have to put up some small bond or something. But to me, that still doesn't make much sense, because if I'm trying to lend, I might not have anything to put up as a bond. So I think what we need are sophisticated, useful reputation systems to enable that use case, and I don't think any of the products out there today are doing it well, but I don't know enough about SALT, because I don't have enough time to look at Ethereum in depth. So maybe, do you know about SALT? No. Okay. Want to shed some light on that?
Sure. So I know systems like SALT are, instead of you traditionally going to a lender and saying, just let me borrow some money, and they say, sure, give me some collateral, they let you do it with your crypto, like your Bitcoin or Ethereum. And without you losing, what would be like the lost equity. So one way to do it is if you want to borrow $10,000 and you have $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, but you actually need the cash quick, you would come to me, you would come to somebody, sell them the $10,000, you would get your $10,000 and the price triples, right? And you've just lost all of that equity gain. So what SALT does is they basically put a hold on it. You would put your money into your Bitcoin into a smart contract, it would hold there, you would
And so what we're doing is, instead of trusting companies and humans that run companies that may have their own incentives to act in a certain way, maybe self-interest, what we're doing is instead putting our trust in math, in cryptography, in these protocols. And so when 1,000 computers around the world start running the software application, think of like running a program on your computer. There's a software to run blockchain networks. People are running that on computers somewhere. So the blockchain is physically somewhere. It's on someone's computer somewhere. But more accurately, it's on many someone's computers everywhere. So thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of computers around the world have a copy of this thing. And that protocol, or that set of rules that we talked about earlier, is allowing them all to stay in sync, and no one can break the law, because you can't change math. Math is kind of like this axiomatic thing that just is. We can't, 2 plus 2 is always 4. So that protocol that we were talking about allows those thousands of computers to all stay in sync, and no one can unilaterally just decide, oh, I'm gonna change the answer to something else. The math always comes to the same answer. So maybe that helped a little. If you have any feedback or any other clarity you'd like from that, we can keep talking. Do you have another question, or?
I'll talk to you after.
Okay, after, sounds good.
I would just add, the way I try to explain this, like my mom, is right now you use a bank and you give the bank X amount of dollars and you got to trust they're doing whatever with it. And they have a ledger, they keep track, they know where all the money's going, or they're supposed to know where all the money's going. The big difference is you'll never know that. I can't go to Chase and say, show me your ledger. I want to know that the money I sent, all of it went to wherever I was going. They're never going to show you that. They'll show you your individual piece, but that's it. And what blockchain does, it's just a ledger, just like the bank keeps, except it's on, if everybody in this computer chose to, or everybody in this room chose to run a blockchain, let's say the Bitcoin blockchain on their computer, they could. You download the whole thing, you would see every record. You would see Nate sent Rob $10, Rob sent Ingrid $50, Ingrid sent Nate $30. Everybody would see it. It's pseudonymous, it's not totally anonymous, but it's partially private, but you can see everything that's happening. And now I never have to trust that Bank of America is doing what I asked them to do. It's just there for all of us to see. And no one person could ever go change it, because if the government came in and said, you know what, you're out of the network, I'm shutting you down, it's all right, because there's a copy, there's a copy, there's a copy. They would have to have armed officers in every human being's bedroom with an internet connection, or shut down the entire internet in order to stop it. And so that's sort of the power of it. It gives us the freedom to interact with each other as we sort of want to, without being able to be censored.
Hi, my name is Curtis. A little bit, it sounds great in theory. Hello?
Yep, good.
Okay. I'm Curtis. I am an instructor at Detroit School of Digital Technology, and what I teach is, I teach cybersecurity, and I am also a certified pen tester. So you know where I'm about to go. I'm going straight to security. The reason why is because, of course, we understand that things like Bitcoin is in beta. I get that. So hear me out now. Think just going around EOS, just looking at the EOS platform, right? Which is what you're telling me. What is it that you guys have in place to stop someone like me, who's a pen tester? Because of course you have the mindset that your business is going to be successful, right? So you guys are you're at the beta stage, you're at the starting phase now. So what is it there that you have in place to stop someone like me from putting a rootkit into your system to where when you grow and I'm ready to launch this rootkit, I'm already embedded in your system? Or what if I know that this Betty here, I'll do a trace route because like you guys said, now we're all connected together. So now I follow Miss Betty here. No offense, ma'am. But I follow Miss Betty and now I log into her system and I have access to all the proxies that she has access to. What kind of security do you guys have in place? Because quite naturally, a big thing with this is security. And by me being one of those people who can actually penetrate systems very, very, very well, what do you have in place that will stop me as the hacker for the past 20 years from penetrating everyone in this room?
That's a great question. Great question, Curtis, thanks. So the question is, how do we secure against attackers, pen testers, black hats, which is a name for malicious hackers who are usually trying to destroy a system or make a bunch of money in a criminal manner. So for Curtis, to answer your question, from EOS Detroit's perspective, we have to be, you're the red team, which is the attacker, and we have to be the blue team. So we have to have very good security on our systems because we're actually, if we're a block producer candidate, that means we're one of the main nodes that are helping to basically hold up the backbone of the EOS network. We're holding the weight. So we're like Atlas holding up the Earth with 50 other companies or 200 other companies. And so that means we have a special responsibility to know security in and out, to patch our systems, to use multi-factor authentication, to make sure that we have firewalls configured, to have all sorts of things in place. Operational security, so I can't let Curtis find out where my computer is because he'll break into the data center and maybe plug his flash drive right into my computer. So there's all kinds of, this stuff keeps me up at night because I have to be a defender. As for the regular average user who's not security savvy, if you're targeting someone and attacking them, and you know what you're doing and they don't, you're probably going to compromise their system. This is entirely outside of the blockchain space. This can happen for any computer. When you go to a coffee shop, you get on public Wi-Fi, and if it's not configured right, and you're going to websites that don't have the little green lock up in the corner, and you're putting in your password, and Curtis can sniff it, and log in as you and change your password and get into your email and steal your identity and whatever. And not that Curtis would, he seems like a nice guy. But
White hat. White hat.
Yeah, he's wearing a white hat, literally. So he's the other side of the white, so black hats are typically considered evil, and white hats are the people who try to break systems in order to improve them. And I would assume that's what Curtis does for a living. Oh, he's a gray hat, which means he's a mercenary. It means if you pay him enough, he'll do whatever. Yeah, security is really hard. Information security is really hard. It's like an arms race. So security researchers like Curtis will find new vulnerabilities in systems like our smartphones, Windows, Mac, Linux, different applications we're using, certain websites, and what we need to do collectively is continue to update our software and practice good security. But the thing is, most people don't know what good security is. You don't come out of the womb knowing how to secure a system, a computer system. This is learned behavior. And it's not taught in school usually either, unless you're going to college for it or something. You can learn online if you're inquisitive, but this is a big problem with all computer systems in general, is it's not easy to stay secure, and if someone is targeting you and attacking you, and they know what they're doing and you don't, you're probably gonna get what's known as pwned. which means they got in, they got your key, they got your password, or whatever. So that's part of our job as a block producer, is to understand how to defend, and you know, that's something we have to continually analyze and make sure we're doing good. Curtis has a follow-up.
I guess to back off what you were saying, because I was listening. So let's say you guys develop an app where you're using two-part authentication, like you said. So now everything is set inside of the QR reader, right? So now I'm walking around, I have this little card in my pocket, or this little QR chip that's attached to my phone, right? So we walk around with this. Now I know for a fact that I can make a mobile device that can take everything off of the phone. So now I have everything about you off of one piece of information that you have. Does that worry you as the EOS company that you guys, I guess I'm talking to John Q. Public, you know, like, I'm sure that you got some backdoor things that are set up, but I know for a fact that that is not going to work. Like, I spent 12 years in the Navy, like, this, so I know I'm 150,000% sure that
You can get into my phone. I'm running Android 8. You probably can because it's Android. iPhones is actually way more secure.
yeah,
So,
I guess what I'm saying is that as the EOS company evolves, and like you said, I guess what I'm taking from this is that you guys will be using Miss Betty's computer as a server to bounce off of, so she'll be farming for you.
not quite.
The decentralized
No.
aspect.
So Miss Betty's. So let me repeat what Chris.
Yes,
Curtis.
So what's
Curtis, sorry.
I was worried about getting it. Right now, I was going to get into her computer.
Right.
She has a proxy that's set up to your computer over at EOS, right? Because everything is bouncing off of you guys. Is that what I'm getting?
That's actually not accurate. So the question was, if Curtis gets into someone who's using EOS's computer, can he pivot from there and attack our block producer infrastructure? And the answer is no. So what we have are nodes that are made to validate the network or sign the blocks. They're the ones that are keeping everything in sync on a blockchain. We keep those totally off. There's no public IP to that. So it's not publicly accessible, but the nodes that Ms. Betty is using to access EOS are publicly available, and we keep those separate. So maybe Curtis could do something sophisticated, but all Ms. Betty's doing is using her keys, crafting a transaction on her computers to send Nate, $5 or something, 5 EOS, and then submitting. She signs that so it can't be forged. It's got her signature on it. Only she can do that. And then she just sends that to us, and we're just like, oh, we got another one. Just toss it in the chain. So when we broadcast it out to, probably at this point we broadcast it out to at least 200 other servers, and they will all have a copy of Miss Betty's transaction. So, you wouldn't even have to go to Miss Betty. You could come straight to our API. It's called an API server, and try to attack that. And I invite you to do that because I actually need people to attack me so that I can make sure that our security is good enough. Sure, we should talk after. Yeah.
One thing, I want to add one little thing just for everybody in the room, because it's a really good question. And beyond EOS, all blockchains, again, they're all starting, so different ones have different vulnerabilities. Bitcoin being the oldest blockchain, it's been attacked by hackers for 9 years straight. The most sophisticated hackers on the planet, including government actors, it's never been hacked. And one of the reasons that is because it's not a traditional internet system like most people think, where you connect to a single server. This is why it's so crucial to have not just a decentralized, but a distributed network of computers. They act as independent. If everybody in here was a block producer, essentially, held a node for whatever blockchain, each one of you have an independent copy of that chain. And so when I make a transaction, whatever it is, for whatever the purpose of the blockchain is, it has to go out And all of you in here, or 51% of you in here, have to agree to that. Each one of you have your own copy of it. Each one of you look at that tally sheet and say, all right, well, Nate sent Rob $5. Nate sent Rob $5. But 49% of you see that, but the other 51%, well, Nate only has $3. How did he send Rob 5? And so you deny the transaction. And so if any single actor or a conglomerate of actors tried to attack the network, they would have to simultaneously attack 51% of the entire network, which is why it's so important to be decentralized. Chase is one bank, right? They might spread their information out amongst a bunch of different servers throughout the Chase infrastructure, but it's Chase. If I can get into one Chase system, I can probably get into, well, I'm not a hacker. If Curtis can get into one Chase system, he can probably get into all the Chase systems, which means it's still centralized. That's not what essentially Bitcoin-esque blockchains are about. They decentralize the entire system, and because of, without getting technical, how it encodes the information, each block has the previous block's information in it. And as soon as you change anything, I mean, even put a space, a period, look at it the wrong way, it changes all the blocks. They all see that change. And so to hack it, you would have to hack the entire network, and not just one block, every block after it to confirm it, right? And so that's one of the things that makes it, you'll hear it called unhackable, nothing's unhackable, but in 9 years that hasn't been hacked yet. And this is the reason why.
All right, so you brought up a second question for me. Both of them are really brief. My original questions, I'd love for you guys to walk me through the governance and the project management around the 5%.
Guts under the hood, or a lot of them do. And so EOS works totally different from Bitcoin. You can actually map all of the same ideas over. There are some similarities, but it's a totally different set of code. It's a totally different project. But they do have some of the same properties, and we can get into that maybe offline, just because I know that'll get into a more technical discussion. And then your other question was, how is the 5% inflation of EOS managed? And that's a great question. So what happens is right now, 1% of the 5% inflation goes to block producers. The top 21 block producers get 0.25% split between them, and it's every time they sign a block, they get a little tiny bit of that. It's a block reward. That's similar to mining in Bitcoin. Block producers in EOS actually sign 12 blocks really fast. So they sign 12 blocks in 6 seconds and then pass it off to the next block producer, and then they sign 12 blocks in 6 seconds, pass it off to the next block producer. So it's kind of interesting. It's like sped up very fast compared to Bitcoin, where you might not get a new block for 5-10 minutes. And so to answer the last part of your question, how is that governed? Currently, that 1% rate, oh yeah, I forgot to say, the other 0.75% of that 1% goes to every block producer that has reached a certain threshold of votes. And what that allows is for the standby block producers that aren't in the top 21 to get paid a little. And this is important because what we need are a whole bunch of standbys waiting, trying to get into the active roster, the top 21, to hold that top 21 accountable. So the top 21, they don't have a sure thing at all, because when they mess up, there's someone waiting trying to get their slot in the top 21 because it's more profitable. So what we have effectively today, I think, are actually 54 paid positions. And so that top 21 is getting paid a little more than the standbys, but we still have about 33 standby block producers that are, you know, they're waiting for the top block producers to mess up so they can take those slots. And then, so that explains what the 1% that covers the cost of the block producers. The reason those block producers need to get paid is because they're actually going to scale the EOS network. So as EOS gains in adoption, those block producers are going to have to keep buying more and more servers. And I think what they'll turn into are they'll be data centers in the long run. So being a block producer is really getting into the data center game in the long run. And so rather than have, today most of the internet is actually on 5 companies' servers. Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google run most of the internet. But what we have with EOS is, at least, you know, if most of the internet moves to a system like EOS, we'll have at least 21 plus all the standbys that are hired running copies. So it decentralizes the internet in a sense. And so lastly, just quickly, the other 4%, right? What happens with that? Currently, there aren't any proposals that have been passed, so that isn't being, it's just being destroyed right away. It doesn't go anywhere. The token holders have to vote to pass a proposal to fund, to take some slice of that 4% and fund something. And so they call it the worker proposal system. So we can hire, EOS can hire devs that way. They can create like a neutral third-party reporting organization to keep the block producers honest. They can fund the EOS Core Arbitration Forum that handles the dispute resolution and arbitration cases of EOS. They can fund anyone in this room's great idea as long as you convince them. And that's really powerful, because what we have is a fully transparent monetary system where a community of people who have some stake in the system can self-govern it and choose to allocate some of the funds that they're literally printing. It's a printing press, just like the Federal Reserve runs, except for it's fully open and transparent.
So can I launch a sub, like in Ethereum, can I run a sub, like a private chain up under your public chain that allows my group to manage our own inflation and destruction?
Yeah, so that's a great question. His question was, can he launch his own variant of EOS? And the question, I'm just going to answer this one real quick, Ingrid. The answer is yes. EOS is designed to be really dynamic. You can run a private version of it. You can change, you can implement your own constitution. You can change the rules, the protocol that we were talking about earlier. You can change the inflation rate. You can change the way you distribute it. So it's EOS software is actually like a toolkit for launching blockchains. And we just so happen to launch one main network called EOS, but there's already at least one other project, 2 other projects actually, that are using the EOS code and launching their own chain. One of them is called Evolution, and the other one's called Wax. So both of those are using the EOS code. I actually know another one that's launching a private chain, but I'm under NDA, so I can't talk about them. And I imagine we'll see lots of variants of EOS, of people who want to take what EOS allows you to do, implement their own constitution, their own rules, make their own tweaks, do their own distribution. Like, we could take EOS, change the token to be DET, and implement our own Detroit constitution and run it. But it's really expensive to run a blockchain, so you might not want to.
Awesome. I just want to get a sense of how many more questions do we have? Awesome. So what we're going to do is take all the questions, and then you can just synthesize it, and then we're going to wrap it up, and then we can network based on that, okay?
Sounds
Awesome.
good.
Okay, so my question is a little bit different than the questions I've been asking. I wanted you to, or asking you to talk about blockchain technology in healthcare. So I work in a healthcare organization, and we run the IT for many hospitals. So just wondering about the applications of blockchain and the privacy in healthcare.
So one question about healthcare.
Mine was about if we're using blockchain as an alternative to banks, how that's effective in terms of when you have money in the bank, you have interest rate, and it's also they're using the money to make loans, which are good for the economy.
Okay.
I was curious about your thoughts on how effective compensation for sharing data using the blockchains.
I get that.
Ask Nate to explain to people how important something like substratum is, especially for VPN. People can use it why it's really important, especially for people like him.
Right. Like Curtis.
Anybody else?
I was just wondering what you think about Cosmos, and if you think that they'll be able to replace like exchanges or things like Coinbase that are essentially sort of acting like middlemen and kind of taking away from the decentralized aspect of blockchain.
Any more? Yeah.
I was wondering about your opinion on how many winners can actually end up in this space in 10 years in the larger ecosystem, whether there can only be maybe Bitcoin, Ethereum, EOS, beyond that, and then how many kind of parts of the larger community around that? What's the size of that? Is there going to be a TripAdvisor? Is there going to be a, who knows? How many winners can there actually be?
And the last one.
Yeah, just try to keep it in your head.
One thing you hear all the time is how much energy or resources it takes to create a blockchain. Can you explain that a little more? Because I get the idea of running an algorithm on a computer takes time, but what are you talking about that it takes so much resources, so many resources?
Awesome. Go.
So that's all the question.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna start with the healthcare question. So there is an example of a decentralized application on EOS that's trying to put medical records on blockchains in an encrypted form to maintain the privacy of the end users while allowing their data to be used for research and then paying them for that. That one's called IRYO, I-R-Y-O. There's a number of other projects too. There's a new VC in town called Blocktown, and they have an Ethereum project called MedCredits, which is another decentralized, there's a lot of projects that are trying to take healthcare records and standardize them, basically. But you know, the first question a lot of people ask there is usually, well, what about my privacy? Because you know, there's laws in the states about HIPAA. You know, you can't leak that information. So most of these projects are trying to figure out some encryption schemes where you can take that healthcare record, encrypt it, put it on the blockchain. Anyone else that goes and looks at it, it just looks like gibberish. But when the person who actually that health record represents wants to access it, they can pull it down, decrypt it, and allow their doctor to see it. So I don't think that any of those projects have actually hit like a stride yet or are being used in hospitals yet, but there's a lot of thought around that. We'll just go back and forth. Sound good, Nate?
Works for me.
Okay.
All right. As far as your question was banks and, say it one more time.
The effect of not having your money in a bank where you can't make interest rate.
Right, interest rates and the economy. So my basic response would be, when you take something like Bitcoin, when you look at the currency coins, Bitcoin, Monero, Litecoin, whatever, all you're essentially doing is taking a centrally generated currency and turning it into a decentralized currency, but it has the same effects. So if a dollar is worth a dollar because everybody in this room agrees it's a dollar. So a dollar in Bitcoin is worth a dollar in Bitcoin because everyone agrees it's worth a dollar. The difference is you don't have to put it into a bank because there is no middleman. And a lot of those interest rates and things that you're talking about, they go to fund the middleman, right? They don't go to fund, they don't necessarily go directly into the economy, any different than if we got rid of all of that and we just had a peer-to-peer cash system, that inflation that used to come out of my original $10, that interest rate would just go to you. And then you would spend that back into the economy. So it's not really going to have an effect. It's almost a zero-sum game. Value is value, no matter how you look at it. Right?
All right. Where were we? Oh yeah. So there was a question about the energy usage. So I'll take that one because I think I can speak to that. So in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other proof of work systems, basically what we have is a lottery that's proportional to how powerful your computer is. And so what everyone's doing that's trying to earn Bitcoin by mining is solving an arbitrarily hard math problem that takes about 10 minutes on average to solve. And the way they solve that is by allowing their computer to run at full blast perpetually. And that's why it costs so much energy, because the amount of energy that your computer is drawing is proportional to how much it's being utilized. So when we're just surfing the web, most of our computer isn't being used, or most of the CPU isn't being used. But in Bitcoin, it's just like 100%, 24/7, 365. It's called pegging the CPU, and that ends up costing a lot of energy. So in systems like EOS, which is delegated proof of stake, we don't have that process. There isn't energy expended for just to solve a lottery problem or a random math problem. There's still energy involved because computers are running and they require energy, but it's actually similar to running servers, normal servers. So, it's similar to hosting a website. It doesn't cost additional energy. And then I guess I'll answer one more question and let Nate wrap up, because I can't remember anyone else's but yours, because I just don't have a good memory. So you asked, in 10 years, will there be will there be one winner? How many winners will there be in the industry? The way I like to view the space is there's really two halves to bringing this technology to the mainstream. The first half is setting up the rails, the infrastructure. These are the blockchains themselves. So the world is a big place, and let's say we have 10 blockchains 10 years from now. They could all have different products that are built on top of them that are serving different markets in different geographic areas around the world, people with different preferences, different apps, different properties. So I don't necessarily subscribe to the one winner take all approach. I think that the other half of the equation is the business development and product development. And I could have a blockchain that may not be the most shiny new thing, but someone has built some application on top of that that just happens to go viral and has millions of users. And if you have, you know, if you have a business and it's working and it's growing, then the blockchain is not just going to disappear. It's got a use now. So I think that, you know, there's plenty, all of these different projects can have different business development that reaches into different markets, different areas of the world, appeals to different people, and, you know, still self-sustains. What I do think is that one chain or one project will take the majority of the market. So MySpace still exists. Who uses MySpace? You can still go to MySpace, but you know, no one uses it. It's still there, and there's apparently a market because people are still using it, but it's a small fraction of, you know, the overall social media market. So I kind of feel that that'll happen, and so, you know, my current hypothesis based on my analysis over 4 or 5 years, is the technology behind EOS is the furthest ahead of the game towards mainstream commercialization and mainstream adoption. So I personally believe that's going to be the one, or has a good chance. But you brought up Cosmos, which is something I haven't studied much, but I know it's interesting. And I know that there's some really interesting stuff there. I wish that I knew more about it. If you know more about it, it'd be great to have you talk about it at one of the Detroit Blockchainers meetups, because I don't know enough to really answer your question. I just know that, you know, the people behind it are smart and have done a lot of good conceptual work. And so it could be just as viable, and I don't know, because I don't have enough time to study it. And maybe Nate knows a little about it?
I don't.
All right. Well, Nate, I'm going to hand this over to you to wrap up the rest of the questions, so if you remember them. You might need people to refresh.
Right.
No, it's okay. Substratum.
All right, so Substratum. So as you all know, Substratum, it's in a public beta now. You can go and download it. But what it is, it's a decentralized internet, and it's going to do a couple things. Its main goal is for people in locations like China who are back behind the Great Firewall. So you download Substratum. Typically, you'd use a VPN, a virtual private network, which is just a server room. You go to get online, and whatever website you ping in, it goes to them first. They redirect the traffic, so your ISP or the government only sees the VPN network. They don't see you're trying to go to Facebook or Google or Pornhub or whatever you're trying to do. Substratum, but the problem with that is they still all have their own individual IP addresses, and so over time, those VPNs have to continuously set up new servers because they keep getting blacklisted. So although you might get through it for a minute in China, they'll shut it down, and then it's like a cat and mouse game. What Substratum does using a decentralized web, using a blockchain system, is all of us become our own server farms. We're our own, almost like our own GoDaddies or HostGators, and we're our own VPNs. And so they can't shut it down because all they can do is, all you know as an individual node is the traffic around you. It's called a neighborhood, where the last route you went, and that changes every single request. So this request, it's us three, the next request, it's us three, the next request, it's those three. It's impossible to block down because it's continuously over and over. And then also what they're aiming to do is become the hosting system. So if you have a website, you put your website on the Substratum node, you go through there, and instead of paying somebody like GoDaddy $120 a year and you get 3 visitors, then you stake your Substratum tokens and you do a pay-per-view. Every time somebody hits, a little bit of that Substratum comes out. And remember earlier I was saying you could be a node, a little of that goes to you, a little of that goes to the system to help refeed the ecosystem, and it circulates throughout. But it's more secure than a VPN just because of the blacklisting. And they have a few other features they haven't released yet. And I'm sure they're not going to be the only ones in the world, but like I said earlier, this is an exciting time, whether you've been in crypto or just getting into it, because before the past couple months and now, all you really had was Bitcoin. everything else was talk. I don't care how much money they raised, I don't care how good their concept was, it was all talk. Now, we have decentralized exchanges that are actually moving. We have a company here based in Detroit, Total, who uses a decentralized exchange system. You know, and Talbot always says, you know, not your keys, not your coins. Every time you go to Coinbase or Binance or wherever, that's their token. You're just borrowing it until you transfer it to your own private wallet. Then it's yours, right? And decentralized exchanges or systems like Total allow you to keep your coin, trade it for whatever, and it goes from your wallet to the other, wherever you're getting it from wallet and back. You don't ever touch an exchange. Substratum, which I've talked heartily about. Companies like Civic, who have working pride, they're with a privacy ID, so you control your identity. Salt, we mentioned. There's a whole slew of things that are now not just talk. You can use them. Down Brave, if I was everybody in this room, I would definitely at least partially use Brave. They pay the creators. They've been paying, like YouTubers. YouTube pays them, but it's sort of shady how YouTube pays. But if you view your favorite YouTuber using a Brave browser, you can stake some Brave tokens, and then based on how many views they get, Brave just kicks them tokens based on their views. And it's all on blockchain. You can view it. You can see it. You can see there's no, are they just picking their favorite YouTubers with getting kickback? Because it's on a public blockchain. You can just go and view. It's the internet coming to life. So it's a really exciting time. Was there any other questions that we missed?
Actually, I think we should wrap it up. I think people are a little restless.
Okay.
And when we can just speak in person, if you can just tell us any updates or anything that we should look forward to from each of you really quickly.
Sure. So what I definitely want to do is say thanks everyone for coming. We've got a few shirts over here and some hats that are kind of a free-for-all. They're not every size. Please only take one so everyone can get something. There might not be enough for everyone, so sorry about that. And then we've also got these great handouts that Dylan, who's sitting down back here, Dylan, can you raise your hand? He designed those, so really good job, Dylan, thank you. He's our creative director at EOS Detroit. Also, thanks to Adam for doing the live stream setup, and Phil for getting the hats made, Ingrid for moderating the panel. Great job, Nate, for attending as well. It's been really fun, and yeah, that's all I got. I mean, vote for EOS Detroit if you have EOS. We're doing all right. We're not getting paid yet, but I think we can change that soon.
Yes.
So our account name is EOSIO Detroit, and if you have EOS and don't know how to vote, come find me and I'll teach you. So.
Yes, a vote for EOS Detroit is a vote for Detroit.
That's right.
Yeah, agreed.
And the other thing I would add is we are planning.
Just really quickly, guys, if you could just hold on for 1 second and be respectful to Nate. And Nate, yes.
We're working on a large-scale conference, hopefully in November, but when we have an official date, we'll release that through several channels. We're working with EOS Detroit, but it'll be similar to this, covering a whole, in more detail, a full day, covering a span of information from, if you're interested in the trading, mining, getting into the development, getting into on government aspects, enterprise aspects. So keep an eye out for that. And I'll be spending the next 2 months trying to do a lot of advocacy. So the best way for you to stay in tune and keep learning more is join Detroit Blockchainers. Go to Meetup, download the Meetup app, and search in Detroit for Detroit Blockchainers. You'll get our group, you'll get everything from there.
The announcements.
And everything everybody does in Detroit, we've worked really hard to sort of combine all blockchain ecosystems in Detroit. And so we promote, everything gets promoted through there, even though it's not necessarily, there's an Ethereum group, there's a lot of groups, but we promote everything through Detroit Blockchainers. So join that, and that's how you're going to stay informed with everything going on.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sitting with us and learning with us. Again, if you have any more questions, please feel free to ask us, any one of us. You can find us through Detroit Blockchainers on the Facebook quite easily. EOS Detroit is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thank you again to WeWork for hosting us. And please enjoy the rest of Detroit Startup Week. There is a networking event that is next, I think. And then tomorrow, the Crypto Cafe is going to have Moving into the Future, blockchain technology and music and the arts. So please come and find out how the arts are using blockchain technology in their business operations. It should be very exciting. Again, I'm Ingrid LaFleur, your moderator. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, everyone, for being here. If you did not sign in, please sign in so that you can hear about other announcements and classes that we'll be having in the future. Thank you.